Welcome to worship at the McPherson Church of the Brethren. We are an open and affirming congregation that strives to be hospitable and attentive to all of creation. We do not always meet that goal, and we have our share of ups and downs. But in the midst of it all, we continue to listen to God's call on our individual lives and the life of this congregation. We continue to seek to follow Jesus, peacefully, simply, together. We are humbled you have chosen to worship with us. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Bud Taylor, and I'd like to welcome you this morning to the McPherson Church of the Brethren at our church service, and a special welcome to those of you on Channel 13 and also on the internet. Do you have any announcements or visitors that you'd like to introduce?
Good morning. I have an update on the Peaceful Oak status. Some of you in Sunday school already heard this. We had hoped we'd have our open house today, but that didn't work out. There is a plumbing problem there with water that's gotten under the house from a plumbing leak, and there's big equipment in the closet that's blowing air underneath the house, and I don't know how much longer it's going to take to get it dry under there, but we're hoping that perhaps we'll have our open house next week. We won't be able to give you definite notice, but you might mark that on your calendar and write TNT beside it for tentative. Also, we still have some larger pieces of furniture to move over there. I think maybe 1 or 2 pickup loads would be enough to do it. So if you are available to do that sometime this week, perhaps Tuesday or Wednesday, we could get that done. And I do want to acknowledge the Cedars, Lamont Rothrock, for letting us store all the furniture there all this time. We really appreciate that. I don't know where we would have put it otherwise. Also, Bev and I will have a sign-up sheet for last-minute items we have discovered that we need or would like to have for the house. If you've already signed up for something, we thank you. You don't need to feel pressured to sign up again, but that opportunity is there. Just find Bev afterwards. Thank you.
Susan Taylor, I want to thank everyone who gave to the Alternative Christmas Gift Market. We still have a few checks coming in, and we'll still welcome them, but we think our total is approaching $20,000. So thank you very much.
Good morning. This is Nancy Magnell. I have 2 things to share with you. One on behalf of Outreach Team. Thank you that after the service last Sunday, all of the tags were gone for the gifts for our Angel Tree and our Step MC families. Now we just need to make sure we get the gifts back. So if you are bringing your gifts unwrapped for us to wrap them, please have them here next Sunday. Otherwise, if you're bringing wrapped gifts, they can come back on the 18th when we'll dedicate all the gifts. So the second thing I want to share is that you may have read in the church announcements that there's a group of us that have formed a support circle that are going to be welcoming a Ukrainian family here to McPherson any day, as soon as they make their travel arrangements. We are still desperately looking for a 3-bedroom house or apartment for them. Apparently housing is very tight, especially 3-bedroom units. So if you know of anyone or anywhere that there might be a 3-bedroom unit available, we'd really appreciate knowing about that. Also, there are lots of other ways we're going to need help when this family actually arrives. So if you have any interest at all in helping with this family, we're going to have a team that will be in charge of welcoming them and orienting them to our city. There will be a team that is going to help get them connected with healthcare resources and the public benefits that are available to them. We have a team already working with the school to let them know that there will be 2 children coming who are going to need English language services, but the parents will need English language classes also. So, we'll need a team to help put that kind of stuff in place. And then employment, of course, employment and job training. They were very well employed in the Ukraine, but obviously they're not going to be able to get that kind of jobs immediately when they come here. So they're willing to work. The language will be a barrier, but we need help getting all those things ironed out for them. So our team meets every Wednesday night now at 5:30 when the meal is being held, so you can come and get your food and come into the room next door and learn more and be a part of it. Thank you.
Morning, Lamont Rothrock from the Cedars. I want to thank this church again for being Jesus in the neighborhood and helping one of our residents get connected with one of her friends for Thanksgiving. That was very helpful. Also, we do have brunch today at 11:30. So if you were asking that question, we are back up and running again. Thank you.
I just have a PS on my Peaceful Oak announcement. Bev and I will be there Monday afternoon from 2 to 2:30 and Tuesday morning from 9 to 11 if you do have a donation that you would like to drop by, or I'd be happy to come by your house and pick it up.
I would just like to ask you all to thank Bev, Nye, and Carolyn Weddle, who's naively signed up for for furnishing this house. It's turned into a heck of a lot of work, so join me in thanking them, please.
Good morning, Jan Hurst here. I just wanted to lift up Emily Dell and ask you to put her on your prayer list. She is currently staying with her daughter, Krista Dell Jones. No, that's not right. That's the other one. Wine. Thank you. Krista Dell Wine, just north of Kansas City. And she's having some heart difficulties at the moment. I think AFib is the proper term. And but she's under good care there. And so, just remember that she's still around. She just is around there, not here.
Hi, I'm Leila Beam, and on behalf of the executive team, I would like to announce Joanna Davidson Smith. She will be our coordinator of admissions, or administration, communications, and faith formation. And her first day is going to be January 3rd. She has done a great deal of work for the Western Plains District, and we so appreciate her abilities. And so we're so happy that she will be working with us. So if you have not met her, she will be in the office in the mornings beginning January 3rd. Thanks.
Now let us continue our morning service.
I invite you to join with me in speaking the gathering words responsively. From the bulb, there comes a flower. From the desert rock, a flow of water. From the rainbow, there comes the hope of life. From the Bible, there comes the word of truth. From the cross, there comes the love of God. From the tomb, there comes the resurrection. From the prophet comes the vision of new earth. But from the stump, from this dried out log, from a family tree that has lost all integrity, there comes the shoot of David, the lifeline of salvation, the promise of justice, the longing for transformation, the word of life, the expectation of Messiah. From the stump of Jesse comes a covenant reborn. Please rise and join in singing, O Come, Emmanuel. seated. And would the children come forward at this time for the children's story?
Oh, here we go. Thank you, Layla, Zora. Oh, good. Good morning, Vivian and Esme. Who's your baby? Okay, glad she's here. All right, so today I have a picture to show you, and I think it's going to be up on the screen also so the congregation can see it. So come a little closer because I want you to look at this and tell me what you see when you look at this picture. What do you see?
I see a lion.
A lion. Some people. Where do you see people? Yeah, you know who that is? That's William Penn signing a peace treaty with the Native Americans that lived there. Anybody else see anything? There's only a lion in there? Come on now. What else do you see? Zora, what do you see? A lamb. A jaguar maybe, or a leopard, yeah. Huh? An ox. I think this is a tiger up here. See the stripes? And like a baby calf, right? What is that? Can you tell what that is? Or this one? I think they're bears. Is that right? Okay. Well, do you notice anything unusual about this painting? This is a picture of a painting, by the way. Yeah, what is unusual about this? Yeah, that kid's touching the tiger. Would you go up to a tiger and put your arm around a tiger? I wouldn't either, no. What else do you think is unusual about this?
That baby's next to the tiger.
Yeah. Oh, there's a wolf in there too. I just saw him poking his head up above at a snake. Man, I missed him before. Do you see the snake? He's sort of coming up and over right in front of the wolf. Man, do you ever see all these kinds of animals lying together? No. No, we don't do that, do we? We don't see that. This is a painting by Edward Hicks. And Edward Hicks painted this over 170 years ago. He was a Quaker minister and an artist. And he actually painted over 60 of these paintings. Each one just a little bit different. There are 62 that are in museums and places, but you know, he didn't give them to museums. He didn't even accept any money for his paintings. He gave them to family and friends, just as gifts. He painted this because he loved, and he painted it because he knew this verse. You want to hear our verse? And this is from our scripture lesson today. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. Oh, there's a goat in there. You guys see the goat? Right there, I think. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. Does that sound crazy? Yeah. He called this painting the Peaceable Kingdom. And it represented his continuing hope for peace in the world. Even back then, 170 years ago, he had a hope for peace. So in the verse, it says, a little child will lead them. Who do you think the little child is that will lead them? What do you think is it? Yeah, who do you think it is? Jesus, yes. The hope is Jesus. So on this Sunday of Advent, when we're talking about peace, I thought it would be interesting to look at how people thought about peace over 170 years ago and how he had that continuing hope for peace because he painted all those paintings. So he continued to have that hope for peace over those years. And just that we need to remember that Jesus brings peace And we have that renewed sense of hope for the peace that Jesus brings during this Advent season. But we also need to remember that Jesus wants us to work for peace, to pray for peace, and to hope for peace. And he also wants you to be peacemakers. So here's my assignment for you. Are you ready for your assignment? You need to go and talk to your family and learn about how you can be a peacemaker, whether it's at school or at home, at daycare, wherever you might be. How can you be a peacemaker? Okay, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for your continued financial donations. You may give online at macbrethren.org. That's maccobb@macbrethren.org. If you are worshiping with us in person, you may place your gift in the offering box at the back of the sanctuary. Just slip it through the slot in the top of the box. Or You may mail your gift to the church office at 200 North Carey Street, McPherson, Kansas 67460. Or hand deliver your check to the church office. Just push it through the mail slot at the Education Building. If you join our worship from afar, please donate to local needs in your area. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you to everyone who makes worship possible. Music doesn't just happen. Technology doesn't just happen. It's everybody pitching in and contributing. And we all know that we learn from our senses. We learn in multiple ways. And lots of times, many of us who work on a worship have lots of ideas how we might make that fuller and might engage our senses, but then it takes bodies to get that done. So sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. I would ask technology to have ready on the second half of the scripture. Could you put Dawn's picture back up when we get to that same part? Thank you. And thank you, Dawn, for bringing that. From Isaiah, we hear about the branch from Jesse. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of God, and he will delight in the fear of God. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. the calf and the lion and the yearling all together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all God's holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. And in that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious.
Well, today's message is going to be a little different. As most, hopefully all of you know, peace is a foundational part of who I am. It is one of my core tenets of my work and my existence as a pastor. Whether it was my time with Community Peacemaking Team or the annual conferences I spend with On Earth Peace as a facilitator or an observer, or just my study throughout my academic journey, folks like Martin Luther King Jr., Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Dorothy Day. It didn't matter. Peace has been a part of my absolute adventure, and it becomes primary to my story. Not just learning about peace, but working for peace, doing all I can to live in peace with one another, within myself, and with creation. But how do I continue to talk about peace without boring you all to tears with recycled stories? Examples you've all heard or you may know, and you're simply grown tired or weary of. Jimmy Johnson, the ex-coach for the Dallas Cowboys, said this: "After 7 years, everybody's heard your story, so shut up." He's not wrong. I have a lot of wild stories to share, but I am but one person. The lens of which I see the world remains limited and focused within my own journey. So today we're going to change it up a bit. Because Advent is a communal journey. It is a time of expectation for the whole, as we all look towards Christmas and the miracle birth that showed us that peace is possible, hope is real, joy lifts spirits, and love. Yes, love. Love wins. However, all too often during Advent, on Sundays in Advent, it is the pastor who remains the sole storyteller, and the community remains the audience. Sometimes that feels a little lacking, like part of the story is missing, like the narrative puzzle has some pieces that need to be filled in. So today, sisters and brothers, is your day. Today is your chance to share stories and testimonies and witnesses to how peace and those who've worked for peace have influenced your life, your path, or have inspired you. I will start with a story about Art Gish and my journey with art. And then Daniel and Raina, God bless them for being children of pastors, will walk around and hand you the microphone as you hopefully will share your own stories and testimonies. But before we get there, I want to add a little side note. This is what we know about education and learning, whether you're 5, 55, or 105. When the seating for education is simply lecture-oriented, meaning we sit there and we receive information, retention's there, of course. Every college professor knows that. But when we are allowed to engage one another, when we can make the lesson, the message dialogical, interactive, personal, well, the retention is much better. And so I ask you, sisters and brothers, would you prefer I lecture for 30 minutes? Or do you want a chance to tell your story and engage the rest of us with your witnesses for peace? You're going to get your chance whether you want to or not. But before I talk about art and begin this adventure, I want also to give you a chance to be inspired and to think about those persons who've inspired you. Because this is one thing I have witnessed and learned and recognized about those who work hard for peace, who embody peace. It is simply this, that no matter the circumstances they find themselves in, peace flows from them. Storms could be all around them, yet this person remains calm. Things may be falling apart, yet they somehow refuse to be swayed. The world itself could be crumbling around them, and they stay the course. They never overreact, never become over-emotional. They are calm, they are still, just ready to do what needs to be done. Those are the peacemakers that have inspired me, and that is a segue to Art Gish. Raise your hand if you knew Art, met Art, or read a text from Art. So, in January of 2009, as Daniel was learning how to crawl, I found myself in the West Bank of Palestine in a village called At-Tawani. And Rick Polhamus, who was our delegation leader, said, yeah, you're going to get a chance to learn from Art Gish. And for the brethren among us, which there were 2 of us, were like, whoa, really? Seriously, Art Gish? Yes, he's there. He's serving as part of CPT. By the way, it's community peacemaking team now. And their desire to be inclusive. They've removed the Christian, it's community peacemaking team. Yes, he'll be there. He's going to lead a session. You're going to learn from Art Gish. He's going to teach you how to be ready for peacemaking. And of course, my sort of energy is just flowing as we make our way to At-Tawani. And then Rick says, but you need to be aware of what to expect at At-Tawani. And it's this village in the West Bank that sits at the bottom of a hill. At the top of the hill is the Mayo settlement. Okay, and at the time that we were there in 2009, At-Tawani didn't have running water. They had a generator that gave them electricity for 1 hour a day. And the students, the kids, school-aged children, mind you, just like the ones that were sitting up here listening to the amazing story, the Peaceable Kingdom, These children had to walk around the settlement to get to school. Now, that may not seem like a big deal because some of you walked uphill both ways to go to school, and so it felt like, why shouldn't they walk a little bit? But the settlers have this game they like to play. As the school children would walk to school, they would take large rocks and they would throw them at the kids. Let that sit with you for a second. 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds having large rocks thrown at them from adults who saw them as something less than human. And so CPT was brought in and created a station there in Atawani so that we could walk with the school children and they would have a witness to their journey. Because we believe with CPT's presence, settlers might behave a little bit. Not totally behave, mind you, but we thought they might behave a little better. Because Israeli soldiers did this when they saw the rocks. We didn't see anything. And so we established a station there, a full-time presence for quite a while. So in 2009, we get there. We're primed for what to experience and what to witness. No running water. Very little electricity, except for 1 hour a day. What water they had was in a well, right? This is really in the middle of the desert in 2009, no running water at all. And the settlers had another game they like to play with the well. They like to take diesel fuel and pour it into the well, the sole source of drinking water for this village. And if it wasn't diesel fuel, bleach would serve really well. And if it wasn't bleach, then they would just urinate into the well. So this is why we were there. I was expecting the worst possible scenario, and when we arrived, it wasn't pleasant. Dove International has a station there as well, and Dove and CPT would work hand in hand. And so we're already on edge, expecting to we see the settlement, when we get there, we know we're expecting some kind of conflict, and Art Gish was going to show us how to handle it. But my memory of Art was not the teaching, the lesson, the session he gave us. So we go into the community center, and the floor was concrete, but it was covered in dirt. It was completely covered in dirt. But whenever you go into a Palestinian home, they are going to give you a feast because you are their guest, and they will take care of you. The Sodom and Gomorrah story, there's a reason why it ends the way it does, because Lot refused to dishonor his guests. And so we're in this community center. They bring us what they can, which is a feast for them. And a little peanut, right? Just a little peanut, as Art is sharing his story, falls off of Art's plate. And the rest of us are thinking, okay, it's just a peanut. Throw it out on the ground, no big deal. Art bends down without missing a beat. The peanut had been on the ground, covered in dirt, for at least 10 to 15 seconds. Art picks it up, doesn't brush it off, throws it into his mouth and eats it. And we all just stared at one another. That may seem completely just no big deal. But it shows is Art's desire to honor those who host. That not even a peanut, a small little peanut, would be wasted because he knew how much it cost them to supply that peanut. And he went on about his story like nothing had happened. And then he ended that session, that talking session, a meal with this. Whenever you see a Palestinian, offer them this. Do I have any Arabic speakers? Ara Karim. And that means what? All God's praises. It is a greeting that shows the Palestinian Arab that you are in solidarity, that you love them, and you're walking with them. I hold that story with Art, and will continue to hold it with me for the rest of my life. And it broke my heart that he left this world not long after that, of all things in a farming accident, right? But I'm inspired and touched by his presence, and will carry that light with me. And so now, Daniel and Raina, please come forward. Daniel will have the blue microphone, and Raina will have the green. That's for the tech crew. It's so wonderful being the pastor's kids. If you want to share a story of someone who's inspired you or peacemaking an example, please, now is your time. This is our communal story of peace. Raise your hand and they will come to you. Hey, you got to stand up, dude.
I'm Jean Hendricks, and as a PK, I know exactly how Daniel and Raina feel. When I was 12, there was nobody to play the piano at our little church in St. Louis, and my dad said, well, Jean can do it. So that's an aside, not my peace story. So again, those of you who know Dad wouldn't be surprised at this piece of racial healing. When I was in about the 8th or 9th grade, we lived in Dayton, Ohio, and this would have been the early 60s, mid-60s. One of my memories is going with Dad down to a picket line downtown for racial justice. But another incident was going to the swimming pool with black children who were in our church, but there were more in the neighboring church, Lower Miami Church of the Brethren, which consisted of a lot of black children. So all of our youth group went to the swimming pool, which would not have been integrated yet at that time, and I don't know what Dad said, of course, to the folks there, but he said if we don't all get in, none of us are coming. So we did all go swimming that day, black children and white children, so that was my earliest instance of racial peace, and it's been hard to understand why that peace has not continued here in these last 60 years.
So, Gina, was that at Trotwood or Mac Memorial?
Trotwood.
Trotwood.
Bear Creek Church and Lower Miami Church.
Yeah. Two beautiful congregations still working hard today. Amazing places. Others, I know you have plenty. Please, share your stories. We need to hear them.
Ann Stover. I was a special education teacher for 33 years, and in that job I came across a lot of behaviors. I usually had to convince the staff, especially the administration, to work along with me in a peaceful way to handle misbehavior. And I especially remember one time when I was teaching in Hayes, I had a young man who was quite troubled, and he would just leave the classroom. At first, I just followed him to see where he would go to make sure he didn't leave the building. When he did leave the building, I wanted to know what he was doing, and he was just sitting on the front step. He managed to calm himself, and then when he was ready, he would come back. The administrator was concerned that he'd left the building because that is against the rules. But I was able to convince him that this was the most peaceful way to handle this. Allow him to calm himself, teach him, help him understand that his behavior is going to be okay and it will moderate over time. As I watched the story in Wichita with the police officers and the young man who eventually died, I thought all they had to do was just let him sit on the floor. Just let him sit on the floor.
Tom Hurst. I want to talk about my dad and two of his brothers. Excuse me. They were conscientious objectors in CPS during World War II. And my dad and one brother were sent to Cambridge, Maryland, to a mental hospital. And I don't know if you know the reality of what happened in mental hospitals in this country when conscientious objectors in World War II were sent to work in them. My dad and his one brother in Cambridge were expected and wouldn't hit naked mental patients. They were just left on the floor all day long in their excrement and their urine to do nothing. And the guards were expected to beat them with broomsticks, and they wouldn't do it. And I can't remember the name of the book that's been written about the transformation that CPS men made in the mental health system in this country. But whatever it is, I know I've read it, and it's an incredible story of how those men who were in CPS transformed our mental health system in this country from one where it was expected to beat people who were just left lying on the floor doing nothing, no treatment at all, into hospitals that started treating people as human beings.
Roger Schrock, many of you know that Carolyn and I spent the first half of the 90s living in this South Sudan in the war zone. We have many stories that we can share, and I thought of what was the most appropriate. I thought of when Bishop Tutu came and said to us, if you call yourselves a Christian, you have no option but to be peacemakers. That's what it means to be. And he challenged us all, the whole of the Christian church in South Sudan, to be peacemakers. Or I thought of the time in which Salva Kiir, the current president of the South Sudan, sat beside Carolyn for 2+ hours and translated as we were working on the people-to-people peace program. But the story that I think is most important comes from our early years in the 80s in South Sudan. We had a gentleman called Roy Nier, who was the head of our labor force. We had people working because everything's done by hand. And Roy was the chief labor person. Several weeks after we had arrived, I saw Roy take 2 men who were fighting, take their heads and bang them together like that. Pretty soon, things had settled down. So I went to Roy and I said, Roy, there has to be a better way than to knock heads to bring about conflict transformation. I said, if you go, instead of banging their heads together, grab them by the neck and push them away, and then talk about what the problem is. About 2 months later, I again observed 2 men fighting. Roy jumped between them and pushed them away, and they negotiated their way to a peaceful settlement. Blessed are the peacemakers.
2 things quickly come to mind with Don's picture. God's gift of animals. Having had a therapy dog and seeing the peace that an animal could bring to humans, we forget that sometimes. We talk about people, and it's quietly animals amongst us bring peace to us all. Second of all, in my mind, historically back in the late 60s, this church became that church in this community. As several high schoolers here documented, wrote, shared their concerns about the war in Vietnam. Families were threatened. Students were not allowed from this church that were allowed to participate in any Kansas high school activities that they had stood out for so many years. The price that those individuals paid, that many of you know, and those families to take a stance. Again, I think it has something to do with when they say, oh, you're that church still to this day. So I appreciate the stance that those people took and the price that they paid during that time.
Doris Kopic. My dad, well, we were in Plattsburgh, Missouri in the 40s, and of course that was a hot time in terms of peacemaking. And anyway, the road that went by the parsonage was really the road that sort of divided the whites from the blacks in that community. And there's so much that I've thought about since that time that I didn't realize at the time. But anyway, there was an old black fellow that lived right across the street from that, and my dad made a point of stopping and visiting with him all the time and learned about him and asked questions like, you know, how old are you when the war was over? Well, he was 10, and what'd you do? Well, I ran and I ran and I ran. But anyway, then the time came to try to do pastoral exchange. And so Dad, of course, wanted to exchange pastors with the black church pastor, and in Plattsburgh, Missouri, that was really quite a deal. And so we had a few members who would not come, and but that didn't change anything. Dad continued to do that, and it turned out that when there was a funeral type in the black community, Dad was the only white person that was there because he was invited to be a part of that. Anyway, as I grew up, then later looked back, and I thought about so much more at that time, the blacks had to be bused to Kansas City if they wanted to go anything beyond the 10th grade. Now, that's a little beyond the story, so I better stop. But anyway, he always worked on that sort of issue, or whatever issues were on. He was also involved with helping with a CO get a conscientious objector getting approved. He worked with Hilton Harmon on that during World War II, and that family got tomatoes thrown to their house and all kinds of things that happened. So there was a lot involved at that point.
Leroy Weddle. I want to come at this a little different. As a person who grew up, had some Brethren background, but I did not have any introduction into the peace position of the Church of the Brethren. I think the first time I even heard about that was when I was in college here at McPherson. So I grew up. One of my goals when I was in high school was I was going to be a pilot of a fighter jet on an aircraft carrier. That was where I was going to wind up. It's what I wanted to do. Circumstances happened, and I went to seminary. One of the people at seminary was Art Gish. The other person there at seminary, professor, many of you would know, would be Dale Brown. Dale taught here. I think maybe his last year was my senior year at McPherson College. But Dale was a professor there. And when I did go to seminary, I was confronted with the peace position. And I struggled with that because that was not part of my background, not part of what my thinking was. And so I struggled with that. And I would confess, I still struggle with that. Sometimes it seems, like some people just seem to be knocked upside the head, or their heads knocked together. I did spend 9 years in the pastorate, and the peace position was one of the things I tried to promote. Tried to help people struggle with that as I struggle with that. So it's been a journey on that, and I'm still on that journey.
Marty Ward. I grew up in the Church of the Brethren, so the peace tradition is sort of just a part of who I am. Yet, at that same time, my dad, his two brothers, and my uncle, my only other uncle, they all served in the military. So how do you reconcile all that? And for me, the reconciliation, the understanding of that, is that it takes a lot of courage to be a peacemaker. And we've heard stories of that courage. And I guess I just want to add on to what Tom said, the courage of those COs in the World War II is what led to the founding of Prairie View. And we've got at least three, Leela, Deb, Janelle, Prairie View employees right here. But that is an example of peacemaking today in the lives of citizens in this community.
Another story from South Sudan. Help me through this with dates and names. Part of peacemaking is confessing and asking for forgiveness. In the mid 1980s. We were in South Sudan. The war was on hold, but it was beginning to build again. We had a vehicle that in our project that was making a trip to a neighboring village one Sunday afternoon. It was attacked, burned, people were killed, others were shot and ran and survived. We didn't know what this was about. 35 years later, Raj and I were in Juba, capital city of South Sudan, and one of our friends took us to a Nuer. Nuer was the tribe that we had been working among, mostly in the 80s. They took us to a Nuer Presbyterian church service one Sunday morning. And as is the custom, guests are made to stand up and be introduced. And when we were introduced, a man from off to the side ran up to us, shook our hands, and said, "I'm coming to see you." I didn't know who this man was, great big man. So a day or two later, at our hotel, this man appeared. And he said, "I want to tell you that I was the person that commanded that attack on your Land Rover." He said, "We were not after you." And fortunately, we weren't in the Land Rover that day. "We were not after you. We were after," he was a rebel, one of these that was working in the bush building the war to start again. And he said, "We thought the chief was riding in the vehicle. We'd been told he would be in the vehicle that day. And we were after the chief because he was cooperating with the government, not with the rebels." And so several people died because of that. He said, "I want you to know we were not against you. We were hoping to kill the chief." 35 years that man had lived with that guilt. I'm calling it guilt. He didn't say guilt, but he said, "I want you to know we were not against you." It is never too late to make a confession, an apology, which will help to bring peace to the world.
Any others? Oh, yeah.
This will be really quick. Carlene Tyler. And I just wanted to mention the Ulster Project because many of us in this congregation have worked with the Ulster Project. And I traveled to Ireland probably 3 times before I was introduced to the Ulster Project. And I have to say that I've never understood until I worked with the Ulster Project, this thing between Catholics and Protestants. I grew up in Iowa, and we had a lot of Catholic neighbors, and it was just, part of the neighborhood. And so I really didn't get it until we worked with the high school students that came from the Ulster Project, and some of them, came as Catholics into Protestant homes and churches, and they were just probably really, really afraid of what was going to happen. And hearing their stories and working with the Ulster Project really helped me appreciate what has happened for centuries. between different sects of the Christian faith.
Others. I want to make sure we get every testimony possible. I know it tends to make things go longer, but I think when we hear each other's stories, time flies. Then let us move forward, and I will add these notes and then close with an update on Act 20. All too often, those of us who are peacemakers, we're quick to jump on our soapboxes and offer orthopraxy and orthodoxy, the right way to do things, the right thinking. And we jump in with all the zeal that we need. We talk about walking humbly and walking peacefully and doing justice and love and mercy. But our actions rarely reflect that. We are so emotionally charged and so involved to work for justice and peace, and they are linked together, folks. They are linked together. That we become too emotional, and we often become irrational. I am guilty of this. So in the work of peacemaking, we have to find a way to center ourselves so that we can remain that stoic presence, that calm in the storm, and one way is through meditation. Herb, am I right? Meditation is a wonderful gift from God. In fact, the Mayo Clinic has a website. The Mayo Clinic has a website dedicated to the medicinal, emotional, mental benefits of meditation, and I would add the spiritual side. Because what we study, we become. We study peace, we become peace. And that remains an ongoing lesson for me. As I study peace, I become more peaceful. The other side is also true, that if I study more violence, even violent words, I tend to react more, I yell more, I feel less patient, less grounded. But if I intentionally take time every single day, as my spiritual director told me to do so, to pray, to meditate, even just to listen to my own breathing, then a peace that passes all understanding enters. And ironically, I exude more of that peace. And isn't that something we all seek anyway? A peaceful life within our being so that we can offer peace outside of ourselves. Because as Roger challenged me this morning, the work for peace continues. In fact, it seems to have no end. And as the author of Isaiah points, there may come a time when war ends, when strife is no more and violence no longer has the final say. There may come a time, and will come a time, as the peaceable kingdom shows us, when lion and lamb will lie together, when harm and abuse to the most vulnerable isn't a daily thing, when enemies become friends. No, friends isn't enough. When those we've labeled enemies become our partners in the work for justice and peace. There is a time, but the work continues. It may feel like for many of us that we're swimming upstream against a violent current, a current that determines to push us to the shore and exhaust us. We labor on. It may seem there's too much going on. The world bombards us with images and messages of hate and violence, so much so that we are tempted to give up or lash back. We must labor on. Even if we never or rarely see the fruits of our labor, we must labor on. Because our faith tells us that a time is coming when peace is not only possible, it will be real. And as followers of the Prince of Peace, we must cling to this promise and the trust and the truth that it will guide us in all that we do. We have to grab a hold of Jesus so that peace will heal our souls and our world, because this is the life that God has promised and illustrated through Jesus. So we must labor on. And now I want to tell you, for me, the final chapter, at least there's more to be written about Act 20, but as of right now, the last I heard, a village that had no electricity really, no running water. Later in 2009, after I left, they got a visit from Tony Blair. And yes, that Tony Blair. Tony Blair went to this village and he said, running water is a basic human right. And so, CPT has left Act 20, and here's why. They've partnered with other Israeli human rights organizations. They now have access to the power grid and have electricity 24/7. They have running water. And this village is becoming a city with a beautiful center. And they've made these changes, sisters and brothers, through nonviolent direct action. They built bridges with other religions through nonviolent direct action. And their growth continues. They now offer classes in this 2-story school building they were able to build, and the Israeli government cannot tear down. And if you understand demolitions, you recognize the power of that. The Israeli government can't touch it. This 2-story school on site, they don't have to walk anywhere, now educates K through 12 and beyond, offers adult classes in IT. So this community, this village that seemed to have little hope at all, is now beginning to dream of what could be, and the fruits of the labor are happening. So much so that CPT was able to say, goodbye. You are in great hands. We're not needed anymore. And it was godly peacemaking that made that happen. Whether Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, the 3 Abrahamic faiths came together to work for peace and for justice. And that Tawani is a serious illustration of how it can be. However, they're also an example of the work that is yet to be, because the settlement mayor, they're kind of sneaky, right? We all love trees, don't we? We all love what trees can offer. Well, no one wants to cut down a tree because it means we don't love the environment, or so it's said. And so the settlers and mayor have decided to build an orchard outside of their wall that is infringing upon at Tawani property. So much so that a shepherd who's had their land for generations has lost that land to the settlement because there's now a fruit orchard where their land used to be. The work continues. But thank God for that. What a wonderful opportunity for us to continue to engage and work for peace and work for justice. It is incumbent upon all of us to celebrate what has happened, both within our own being and in the efforts we've seen and heard the stories today, but also to recognize we are not yet finished. There are parts of the world, even within our own community, that are crying out for justice and for peace. And we could just be the healing balm that God is calling into these spaces. So may we, sisters and brothers, have the energy to celebrate how far we have come and the voices who've come before us and inspired us. But may we also have the courage to keep moving forward until the day we will indeed see the lion and the lamb lying together and the most vulnerable among us harmed no more. Because what we study, we become. Amen. Please rise for our sending song.
Oh
Please be seated. There's not much I could say after that would make a whole lot of sense or even add to. And so may it be so. May it be so. Go in love, go in peace. Amen.